Big threes in the modern NBA, a trio of players that essentially become the centerpiece of a team's offense and or defense. And big threes come in all shapes and sizes, whether it be a guard, a forward, and a big, or two starters and one six-man, or even three of the league's purest scorers. You're buying all in to contend for a championship, which guarantees one of two things: either a new banner to hang, or a rebuild out of disaster. This season, we saw several big three pairings, from juggernauts to laughingstocks, and it's time to see if it paid off. So in today's video, we're going to be grading each of these big threes based on their performance. Make sure to subscribe, or you have the 1v1 2018 LeBron. Starting out west, where most of the big threes lie, we have a more classic iteration of the big three in the Minnesota Timberwolves, comprised of All-NBA guard Anthony Edwards, forward Julius Randle, and former/disgraced Defensive Player of the Year Rudy Gobert. Now, when this big three formed this season with the Julius Randle for Karl-Anthony Towns trade, a lot of people signed this off for a lose for the Wolves. And yes, the season did start off rough, with clear issues of fit and chemistry. Their spacing was egregious, as well as their record, considering where they left off last year. But fast forward and they made it to the conference finals. Anthony Edwards didn't let the awkward fit affect his game and simply elevated his three-point game, making the most threes in the league this year. And Randle dominated in the post, winning matchups against defenders like LeBron and Draymond in the postseason. What limits this big three, and the reason why I'm giving it a B- is Rudy Gobert. Yes, he had that monster performance against the Lakers to end their season, but he did that without an imposing center. And when going against a team like the Thunder with two centers, he was damn near unplayable. He lacks any sort of post move on the offense, and with his lack of foot speed, he gets absolutely fried when he goes against an offense that switches, which is why they tried trading him for KD ASAP. But yeah, an awkward fit that got the job done through 2 rounds due to Edwards playing at an unbelievable level and Julius going on a hot streak that cooled off quick in the conference finals. But with no long-term upside and Gobert only getting worse, B- seems right. Heading out east, we have the Philadelphia 76ers with the all-star trio of Embiid, Maxey, and the new addition in Paul George. And while this is technically a big three on paper, I know they're for sure getting paid like it. They were absolutely abysmal from start to end. Starting out the season 5-15, Embiid was getting suspended while still injured. Maxey was calling out Embiid in team meetings just for his only reliable co-star on the court to be rookie Jared McCain, and Paul George had more podcast uploads than field goals made. Now this big three failed, mainly due to injuries as they only played 15 games together, but even in those 15 games, they went for a record of 7-8, mainly due to the lack of elite play from Paul George, which is what they were hoping was going to take this team over the hump in the postseason. Now I don't want to say anything too conclusive about this trio, because I believe they can still get it together, especially in this now weakened Eastern Conference, if Paul George and Embiid can get healthy, but that seems to be a really big if, because yeah, this was one street close on the bench big three. But with their injury history and Paul George's increasing regression, Philadelphia was a dumpster fire this year and they're getting an F. Heading back to the West, we have a big three that showed out and lived up to their expectation in being forever mediocre. We have the mid three of the Sacramento Kings. Well, it actually started out as the dim three, because the beginning of the season is when the famous purple light over their stadium went out, with the big three of All-NBA guard De'Aaron Fox, All-Star big man Sabonis, and one of the league's best scorers in DeMar DeRozan, who was added in a trade in the offseason. Yeah, it was clear from the beginning that this dim three wasn't going to be what takes the Kings to a deep playoff run. I mean, you'd think they learned by now what would happen if you put a bunch of ball-dominant players who don't play defense and also don't operate outside the three-point line, leading to bad spacing, all in the same starting lineup. Sacramento was a dumpster fire, from players-only meetings in the first month of the season, to firing coaches, to trading away your franchise player in Fox, who led your team to the playoffs for the first time in years just 2 years ago. Well, that spelled the end of that dim three and began the mid three of Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Sabonis, essentially running it back from the Chicago Bulls. And just like the Bulls, they achieved their ultimate season goal, an appearance in the play-in tournament. They weren't terrible, but they weren't exactly good. They were just mid. And I think if you translate mid into a letter grade, it should give them a C. Sticking in California, we have the Last Dance 3 and Curry, Butler, and Green, who have an average age of 36 by the way. But that didn't stop them from playing at an elite level this year. The whole reason they traded for Jimmy Butler at the deadline was to help Curry contend, and they succeeded. Going on a 23-7 run with Jimmy Butler to close out the season, the Warriors as a whole went from out of the play-in to contending for the 6th seed, and that's because what this big three can do to the other team. Curry alone is an offensive powerhouse as he has been for years that teams will build entire schemes to defend against at the 3-point line. And while they're doing that, Jimmy Butler is going right at you with his rim pressure, attacking the paint and getting to the line. Curry and Butler at the helm of your offense is like a two-headed monster, as they both can get hot and dismantle a team's defense. And you have Draymond Green literally running the Warriors' defensive system, with Jimmy Butler contributing on that end as well. And say what you want about Green's antics, I know I got a lot to say as a Rockets fan, but he can still lock up most of the league's best big men and forwards on any given night. A perfect combo of two-sided offense and veteran defense. Now for their performance in the postseason. They unfortunately were able to withstand my surging 2nd seed Rockets in a Game 7 series, and it's my opinion, if Curry didn't get hurt, they would have spanked the Timberwolves in the 2nd round. Overall, due to their age, injury concerns, and possible aggression, I don't consider them a contender, but they're still getting an A- from me. Heading back east, we have the big three of the #1 seeded Cleveland Cavaliers, which comprise of Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley, an all-star point guard, an all-NBA shooting guard, and a DPOY forward, who led their team to 64 wins. It shouldn't take much guessing to what grade they'll be getting from me. This was an A+ season. Similar to the Warriors, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell led their offense, while Evan Mobley anchors their defense with his agility and 6'11" frame, able to guard 1 through 5. And still contributing to the offense by opening up the floor with his ability to knock down threes. And overall, the entire trio can each score at all 3 levels. Another big three that found success would be this year's champions in SGA, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren. And I actually hesitated to qualify this as a big three this season, as they didn't even play majority of the season together. Like, I kind of looked at this as a Tatum and Brown being the star-wing duo of the Boston Celtics, and the big man Porzingis just contributed whenever he was actually playing basketball. But Tatum and Brown were the centerpieces. Now, when Chet did play, they had a record of 26-6, and they still dominated as the Western Conference 1 seed. And when they all play well, I doubt any team in the league can match them. The ball moves through them on an elite offense, and they all can lock up on defense. Yeah, all of them, which is rare for a big three pairing. Without a doubt, A+ for OKC. Another young big three out of the West consists of all-star John Morant, former DPOY Jaren Jackson Jr., and a guy who averages 20, Desmond Bane. Yeah, they were 1 season away from being a mid-3, and they're not even in an awful fit. They were just in a bad situation when it comes to the turbulent coaching situation and roster construction. This was a great young core with a lot of potential, as we saw in 2021 and 2022 and 2023. We don't speak about 2024, but they've had potential for years. But they've also had suspensions, injuries, and coaching systems that literally limited their usage. Yeah, just not the right situation for them to really take the leaps needed when it came to evolving their offensive games. They always had that hustle on defense, but were frankly stagnant on the other end, outside of Jaw's miracle drives to the paint. Anyway, they were the 2nd to 3rd seed for most of the season, as they were previous seasons, and fell apart near the end. Got violated by OKC in the largest Game 1 blowout. Bane got shipped to Orlando, which would hopefully allow each of the three to take the leap we've wanted to see for years, in better and more free situations. Overall, a B. Another big three that didn't live up to their potential was the unguardable, max scale team up of pure scorers. Just go ahead and plug in that one Devin Booker interview.
I mean, saying it respectfully, I don't know how teams are going to guard us.
Yeah, till this day, I don't know why you put three players who simply can't operate off the ball on the same starting lineup, and their main skill pertains to scoring with the ball. It's almost like a coach asks the front office for a point guard to better distribute the ball, and there's no way he would have gotten laughed at, right? Yeah, this was doomed from the start. No one in this big three could get into an offensive rhythm, and they weren't willing to play a lick of defense. Devin Booker tried being point book for a few weeks, but that hurt his offensive game. I talked about it more in my previous video where I ranked the league's shooting guards. Either way, they couldn't even make the play-in. Got swept last year in the first round and blew it up when they traded KD to my H-Town. I'm going to go ahead and give this big three a D. Pause. Back to the East, we're going to look at a big three that was without a doubt failure, but generally made me laugh. The quote-unquote big three of the Milwaukee Bucks. All-NBA Giannis Antetokounmpo, All-Star Damian Lillard, and Tony Snell 2.0. 0 quarter stats, 0 accolades, KYLE KUZMA. Like, I remember when the trade went through and everyone branded this as the Bucks' new big three. I think people thought KYLE KUZMA was just sitting home since the Lakers, as if he wasn't shooting below league average to start out the season with the Wizards and posting some crazy low net ratings, as if the Wizards weren't already a terrible team with no expectations to win. Giannis and Dame were already struggling as an awkward fit. Their ball-dominant games did not complement each other at all, but they were still the highest scoring duo in the league. And they thought the answer was to add KYLE KUZMA, who hasn't played meaningful or winning basketball since the Lakers back in 2020. Instead of being the perfect glue for this team and this trio, KUZMA was passive on the offensive and defensive end of the ball, and they only played 18 games together as a trio, and didn't even really get to play together in the playoffs. But KYLE KUZMA, in a big three in 2025, game 1 against the Pacers, with no Dame. He went out there and performed a tribute to Dame's number 0 with 0 recorded stats in 22 minutes. Yeah, I just can't take this quote-unquote big three serious. Maybe it was Doc Rivers' shaky lineups that did them in. Either way, 18 games are all we're going to get, cause Dame was recently waived after tearing his ACL, so they get an F for foolery. Heading back out west, we have the Showtime Big Three of Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and Austin Reeves. Now just imagine someone telling you that a year ago. Insane. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get this out of the way. This big three completely lacks any scrap of defense. Like, they are unable to keep guys in front of them, and they're still getting a B+ from me, because their offense was genuinely Showtime. And not in the sense that they were historically great, but in the sense that they essentially were the Lakers' scoring ability. There's a reason why JJ Redick let them out there for a whole half in a playoff game. They lived and died based on what these three guys did with the ball in their hands. They each averaged 20 points and shot well above league average. Each can handle the ball and run the offense, and they all can operate off ball to some degree, effectively serving as a three-headed monster on offense. After this trio assembled, they were able to bring the Lakers from a 5th seed to a 3rd seed in a really tough Western Conference. They had good wins against Minnesota, the Clippers, the Rockets, the Knicks, and even OKC. Yeah, they got bounced in the first round, but their roster construction generally sucks. Like, they didn't have a functional center. Anyway, an instant offense big three is enough to get a B+ in my books. The Denver Nuggets and their longtime champion big three of MVP Jokic, Jamal Murray, and sharpshooter Michael Porter Jr. Now, this has always been a really good pairing. They've been a top seed in the West for the past few years, won a ring in 2023, went to the Western Conference Finals the next year in 7 games, took the future champs in OKC to 7 games in the second round this year with a banged up squad. Aaron Gordon was on one leg and MPJ was really on one arm. Even with a late coach firing, injuries to the rest of their roster, this team will always be in a position to contend with their core. Jokic and Murray's two-man game is the best in the league, and MPJ spaces out the floor and makes the defense pay if they help too much on Jokic and Murray. But when it comes to this year specifically, MPJ has regressed when it comes to his effectiveness next to the two-man game. I mean, there were moments in the season, and especially in the postseason, where he was benched for Russell Westbrook in 2025. Not necessarily because MPJ has become a bad basketball player, just not a proper fit for the two-man game at this time. For their overall tenure together, they're getting an A from me. They're either getting a championship or contending. This was a core of competency. Now for the last big three grading in this video, well, it belongs to a franchise whose history contains arguably one of the greatest big threes of all time, in the Miami Heat. Now their modern big three is comprised of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Hero. Probably one of my favorite big threes in the league, just because of the insane postseason runs they've given us, but they've just never reached the finish line. 2020, they reached the finals and lost. 2022, they reached the conference finals and lost. 2023, they went from a play-in team and managed to reach the finals without Hero. And in 2024, Jimmy was injured and his feud with Pat Riley began. It didn't matter the squad you surrounded this three with. Often than not, they were surrounded with subpar roster construction. With these three operating with versatility on both sides of the floor, all three can play make on offense, and Jimmy and Bam bring the intensity on defense. And then obviously there's the juggernaut that is playoff Jimmy Butler, absolutely decimating the opposing defense inside the arc. This team always had a chance. Now this season never really took off due to the whole Jimmy Butler feud and later trade, but no matter who were the favorites in the Eastern Conference that year, they knew they had to get past the Heat, and more often than not, they didn't. But considering this season, they fell apart in a dumpster fire, the grade they'll be getting from me will be a D. Now that was all the big three gradings for this season. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, or you have to go against the Warriors super team. Either way, have a nice day.